Week 11 is here. It's officially November, so a lot of conference title races are narrowing, and this week will have a lot to do with that. But before we get into all that, please make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. It means a lot to me in this channel. So let's go ahead and get right into it, starting with BYU versus Texas Tech. And ladies and gentlemen, I believe we are watching the first game in a series. And what I mean by that is I do not think this will be the last time that we see either of these teams play each other. I really believe that this matchup will happen again in the Big 12 championship game. Utah may have something to say about that, but they don't really control their own destiny at this point, so we'll see. Anyways, these are the top two teams in the league right now. The winner here basically is a lock for the conference title game. So the question is, who is it going to be? Is it going to be the road team coming off of a bye week that's fresh and rested, and that's BYU? Or will it be Texas Tech, a team that is playing at home, and they're grinding through their sixth consecutive game? Well, I don't know. So let's talk matchups, because this is a massive test for both sides. BYU has looked elite at running the ball all season long. They've dominated teams on the ground. They've controlled time of possession, and they just flat out wore some defenses down. And the big but is that those defenses have been average at best against the run. And this week that changes because they are facing the number one run defense in the country. So the question becomes, can BYU still run the ball effectively against this Texas Tech defense? That's pretty much the entire key to this game, in my opinion. BYU's entire identity revolves around pounding the rock, controlling the clock, and forcing the opponents to make mistakes. They play slow, methodical, smash mouth style football, and before you know it, the game's over and you barely have the ball. But I do not think it's going to be that easy this time. Texas Tech is really good up front. The Red Raiders, they can stuff the run early and force BYU to throw. Then things can get uncomfortable because, let's be honest, BYU has not looked great through the air this year, and Texas Tech can come after the quarterback pretty well. So if Texas Tech can force BYU into their style of game, that high tempo, more possessions, forcing the Cougars to throw, this one could get really ugly. Of course, a lot of teams have tried to force BYU out of their rhythm this year, and none of them have succeeded. But I do think that this will be the week, so give me Texas Tech. Moving on to Oregon versus Iowa, and how good is Oregon really? Coming into the year, they were viewed as a national title contender. Then they played maybe the best team in the country, and they lost. And since then, their schedule hasn't really given them a chance to prove themselves. But this weekend, at least in my eyes, that changes. I think that Iowa is a really great team. I have a lot of respect for what Iowa has become at this point in the season. They're tough. They're physical. They play an incredible style of defense. And for once, they can actually score points. Now, they're not going to light the world on fire on offense. They still struggle to pass the ball, but I wouldn't count on keeping them to 10 points either. So for Oregon, going on the road against this Iowa team and getting a win, especially if it's a dominant win, would tell me a lot about who they really are. Because the last time I watched them, I saw a talented but young and inexperienced team. One that can absolutely light up the scoreboard, but one that can also crumble when the pressure ramps up. And that's exactly where I think Iowa thrives. They're built to make games ugly. They're disciplined. They're physical, and they just don't crack under pressure. So the way I see it is if Oregon can force Iowa to play their game, that fast-paced, trading big plays, then they can win this game in dominant fashion. But if Iowa can slow things down, turn it into a rock fight, and make Oregon feel uncomfortable, they've got a real shot to pull the upset outright. I keep going back and forth on this one. There's so much talent on Oregon's side, but I think I land on the side of Iowa here, actually. I trust them more. I trust their discipline. I think that they can drag Oregon into a physical, grinded-out type of game. I trust their experience. We've seen Oregon struggle a few times this season against inferior opponents, and if they mess around, I think that they will get bit here. For Iowa, it's a must-win game, and I think we'll see their best effort of the season. And by the way, the weather looks to be a major factor in this one, which gives me even more reason to pick the Hawkeyes. The weather would disproportionately favor Iowa since they don't pass the ball a ton anyways, and Oregon does. So Mother Nature could force Oregon to play Iowa-style ball from the beginning. So give me Iowa to pull off the upset. Moving on to Tulane versus Memphis, and what happened last week with Tulane? This game was shaping up to be a play-in game for the playoffs, and then Tulane just got absolutely handled by UTSA. Now, I'm not going to overreact to that loss. I watched Memphis do the exact same thing a few weeks ago, getting beat by UAB and then just bouncing back the next week and beating USF. Sometimes it's just how it goes in college football. Plus, Tulane's head coach, John Summerall, has been mentioned in a lot of coaching searches lately, and that kind of noise can definitely affect the team. So honestly, that's what I think happened last week. Now in this game, both head coaches are hot names on the market, and that may play a factor again. Who knows? But what I do think that I know is that Memphis is the better team anyways. And they're playing this one at home. They already had their mulligan against UAB, and I think that's behind them. This feels like a chance for Memphis to settle in, control the tempo, and take one more step forward towards locking up a playoff berth. So give me Memphis to handle business at home. Moving on now, my number one team in the country, the Texas A&M Aggies, are heading on the road to face a Missouri team that's beat up and desperate for a win. Both teams are coming off of a bye, but they're kind of coming in with different outlooks. For A&M, we know they won't have their starting running back Le'Veon Moss. For Missouri, they will be without their starting quarterback Bo Pribula and likely their top tight end Brett Norfleet as well. That's a pretty big difference. I'm far less worried about A&M missing Moss because they've already proven that they can win and dominate without him. Missouri, on the other hand, is still a complete mystery. Last time we saw them, they lost to Vanderbilt when Pribula and Norfleet went down in that game. And honestly, I actually like their chances better in this game with the freshman Matt Zollers under center. I was never a believer in Pribula. He struggled to push the ball downfield. He looked lost at times and made Missouri incredibly one-dimensional. Now, Zollers is young, so yes, you could get a few of those freshman mistakes, even a couple of interceptions, but his upside is much higher. That said, without Norfleet, that's a major blow. Losing your top security blanket is like playing with one hand tied behind your back, and that's just too much to overcome, I think, against a team as complete as A&M is. Missouri's got a strong ground game with Ahmad Hardy, and their defense is super legit, but this A&M team is elite on both sides of the ball. Marcel Reed is dynamic, the receivers are explosive, and even without Moss, they can run efficiently, and their defense can just take over a game. We've seen A&M win every kind of game at this point, shootouts, defensive battles, you name it. So no matter how this one plays out, I trust Mike Elko and the Aggies to find a way to get the win. Now, discipline on the road has been a concern at times, but I've seen improvement in that area, and if they can stay composed, I think A&M can go into Columbia and get another big win. Moving on to Alabama versus LSU, and there's just something really special about this matchup. I know it's not considered one of the all-time classic or historic rivalries, but every time these two meet, especially under the lights, it just feels like something bigger. There's intensity, there's pride, there's history. Unfortunately, this one isn't in Death Valley. I think it shines even more there, but Bryant-Denny Stadium on Saturday night is going to still be very electric. Both teams are coming off of a bye week, and this matchup actually reminds me a lot of that Georgia-Florida matchup from last week. And that's because LSU fired their head coach, Brian Kelly. So they've had a full week to prepare under an interim staff. There's no film, no tendencies. We really don't know what this new version of LSU is going to look like. I saw Andy and Ari call them zombie LSU. Any of these teams that have no head coach that are with an interim head coach and staff, they call them like zombie LSU, zombie Auburn. I think that's pretty funny. I think it fits, honestly. And I think that makes them really dangerous. This team has a ton of talent. There's a world where this offense looks immediately better. Fresh energy, new voice, players motivated to prove something. And from what I've heard, Brian Kelly's presence had really worn thin inside that locker room. And when you remove something that toxic, sometimes the symptoms can go away just overnight. So yeah, I think we're going to get an inspired performance from LSU here. But I just don't think it's going to be enough because this Alabama team is really, really good, especially at home. Sure, the Tide have not been able to run the ball consistently. Their defense has had some shaky moments, but this group has found ways to win. And after a bye week, I expect them to look more complete than they ever have. And the idea that LSU's offense is sharper is more of a hope than anything they've proven up to this point. Meanwhile, Ty Simpson and this Alabama offense is proven. They've shown that they can score, they can finish drives, and they can deliver when it matters the most. So while I love to see LSU pull an upset against Alabama here and hand them their second loss, I just don't see it happening. This feels like a game where Alabama uses that bye week to reset, regroup, and take care of business in front of their home crowd. So give me Alabama to win at Bryant-Denny. And I have a few upset alert meter games here, games that I think could get really interesting, but not ones that I want to fully break down, starting out with my Georgia Bulldogs versus Mississippi State. And honestly, anytime Georgia is playing this year, they are on upset alert, apparently, because they keep playing these really tight games that come down to the wire. And going on the road in the SEC is never easy, so that's something I'm cautious about in this game. I've also seen Mississippi State play some really impressive games against quality competition this season, but they've had a really hard time closing out games. They're like the inverse of Georgia. Georgia is great at closing out games, and Mississippi State is great at blowing them. I do think Mississippi State is a lot better than the record says that they are. So I think Georgia is at risk of losing this one on the road here, but I do trust Georgia to get the win because of that champion DNA and their ability to close out wins, while Mississippi State can't do that very well. So I'm putting a 4 on this game. Moving on to Indiana versus Penn State, and Indiana has just been blowing out opponents all season long. And while I think Penn State has the talent roster to compete, if they were to wake up and check back in, I just think that they are broken, dead, and checked out at this point. So I think Indiana goes on the road and makes this one ugly. It's kind of sad that this game is what it is. It could have been a lot more interesting, like we expected it to be in the preseason, but that's just not going to happen. So give me a 2 on this game. And last, I have Auburn versus Vanderbilt. Auburn fired head coach Hugh Freeze, so they're zombie Auburn here. So it's a classic interim staff scenario where we have no idea what we are going to get from this Auburn team. What I do know is that no matter how good I think Auburn's roster is, they still don't have a quarterback. So while I think they get an inspired effort under this new interim staff, I just don't see them all of a sudden finding an offense like I think we might see from LSU. But I do think that Auburn's defense can put Pavia in a box, maybe force him to make some bad decisions and keep them in this game. But I think Vanderbilt wins it. I'm going to put a 6 on this one. And that's all for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Peace.